Hey everyone, we got some great news for Apple and Qualcomm stock investors as global sales of smartphones are expected to be much better than expected in 2024. I'll review the details of these new results and what it could mean for Apple and Qualcomm stock investors. I want to thank the Motley Fool for sponsoring this video. Visit fool.com/Parkev for the 10 best stocks to buy now. So, according to research firm IDC, they raised their forecast for full-year global smartphone shipments on Tuesday, citing growth in the first half of the year as consumer electronic demand recovers and AI features attract buyers. They now expect shipments to grow by 5.8% to 1.23 billion units in 2024. That's up from the previous forecast of 4% growth to 1.21 billion units. In other words, growth is expected to be roughly 50% better than previously expected, from 4 to 5.8% growth. That's great news for Apple and Qualcomm stock investors, as they are each dependent on the growth of smartphone sales. This is a largely saturated market, with many individuals already owning a smartphone, and dependent on growth relies on increases of replacements or shortening replacement cycles of smartphones. Now, this comes as Apple is set to hold its fall event on September 9 at its headquarters in Cupertino, California, where it's expected to unveil new iPhones as it looks to reverse a global sales slowdown, particularly in China. At its developers conference in June, Apple unveiled a series of AI features for its operating system under the name Apple Intelligence. Now, Apple relies on iPhone sales to fuel growth and profitability for the business overall. In the latest quarter, $39 billion in iPhone sales were almost 50% of its total sales of $85.7 billion. What's more, in the first 9 months of its fiscal year, Apple's iPhone sales totaled $155 billion, more than 50% of its $296 billion in overall sales. Still, if you look at year over year, iPhone sales are declining, down to $155 billion from $157 billion. And so the growth of the industry overall is good news for Apple, as it aims to facilitate growth in its iPhone business. Now, the iPhone is more important to Apple than even the large percentage I just highlighted here, because you're more likely to buy Apple's other products if you have an iPhone. You're more likely to buy an Apple Watch. You're more likely to buy AirPods. You're more likely to subscribe to one of Apple's services. So the iPhone is essential to Apple's business, and it's great news to see that the overall industry growth for shipments of smartphones is increasing, and Apple will benefit from the growth in the industry overall. Now let's shift our attention to Qualcomm, which generated $9.4 billion in revenue in its latest quarter, which was up by 11%. Qualcomm generated $5.9 billion sales in its handsets segment, which was up 12% year over year. So smartphone sales are more important to Qualcomm arguably than they are to Apple, because they consist a larger percentage of its overall revenue, even though it doesn't have the same ecosystem benefits for Qualcomm as it does for Apple. Now, interestingly, in its latest quarterly results, Qualcomm highlighted the importance of a shift inside the smartphone market. So let's go through what the CEO said. So even in a market which is kind of flat to low single digits in growth, the premium tier is actually growing faster, and we've seen that. We've seen a larger premium tier enabled by AI. We are happy with the trajectory of AI features. We used to have a few, now we have tens of AI features, and eventually we'll get to hundreds. We don't have any heroic assumptions in our model, but we actually like the direction this is going. That could create an interesting upside if we have an AI-driven upgrade cycle. So interesting comments from Qualcomm in stating that even though the overall smartphone market is going to grow by low single digits, which is what we saw from the report, right? 4% growth is low single digits, low to mid single digits. It's now better than expected. They were expecting low single digits. We're likely going to get mid single digit growth in smartphones. But within the smartphone market, there's a shift to more premium phones as a result of artificial intelligence. And that's great news for both Apple and Qualcomm stock investors, as they benefit when consumers spend more on more premium smartphones. So not only are we getting this shift to more premium smartphones, like Qualcomm noted in their most recent earnings call, but now the overall unit sales are actually much better than expected. The growth rate is 50%, roughly 50% better than expected. So this is really great news for Qualcomm and Apple stock investors, and a nice upside here from what Qualcomm was expecting and what Apple was expecting in 2024 in regards to smartphone sales. Now, Apple's and Qualcomm's stock price are up year to date in 2024, although they have seen some trouble in recent months. You can see Qualcomm stock price, after reaching a peak close to $225 per share, fell to almost $150 per share before recovering to $174. Apple, meanwhile, has had a good year. Its stock price is up from about $190 up to $228 per share, and the next iPhone event upcoming could facilitate growth in the company's stock price, as investors expect that could be a catalyst for a share price increase. Now, Apple and Qualcomm are selling at reasonable valuations, with Qualcomm selling at less than half the valuation of Apple. Apple's forward price to earnings of 30.79 is relatively fair value, or a little bit on the expensive side for Apple stock, whereas Qualcomm's forward PE of 15.5 is a little bit on the inexpensive side for its share price going back several years. I recently told investors and highlighted that Qualcomm is an excellent AI stock investors can consider buying, and I've also had Apple stock rated as a buy on my list of stocks to buy. They're both trading at reasonable valuations. I don't think either of them are very cheap or very inexpensive. I think they are good businesses trading at fair valuations, and this report here with the upside in smartphone sales makes each of these investments a little bit more attractive than previously expected, given the increasing smartphone unit sales in 2024. Before I let you go, let me tell you about the greatest deal on YouTube. With just a click of a button, you can get free financial analysis from a professor with decades of investing experience. So what are you waiting for? Hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you again soon.